Okay. Hmm. May error. Bakit kaya? I can't open Zoom. Dali lang ha. Hmm. Ano open? Wala siya dyan. Okay. Hmm. Then, like this. Okay. So, we're on that particular slide. So, it's called models of the dendritic intermesh and K equals 3 market system. So, what do we mean by this one? It's all symbolic there, and you're seeing that image, which illustrates the intermeshed market system. So it's a sophisticated spatial model that explains how market towns and cities are interconnected within a given region. So you can see there strategic city and then port city, and it means that there are represented by, different, they are characterized differently. So it's a diverse type of cities. And then, um, so what do we mean? Okay, what do we mean by dendritic anyway? Um, well, let me see. Tanggal yung aking kan. Tanggal yung, alright. So dendritic is in the context of urban planning and design, the term dendritic refers to a branching. Okay, so you can see like a branch illustration there. Branching, it's also tree-like pattern or structure, and it's often used to describe road networks, street patterns, or transportation systems that resemble the branches of a tree, with many smaller paths or roads feeding into larger ones. So that's what it means by dendritic. But in this particular illustration, we need to understand it because it's a model. So it shows a network of interconnected nodes. Okay, those nodes there representing different types of market settlements, such as number one, we have the market villages. We have the market villages there, market or market system. And so standard market towns, then you also have the intermesh. Okay. So this explains about yeah, economic connectivity. Means that how different settlements within a region can be optimally connected to maximize economic efficiency and accessibility. Also, in the context of spatial planning, you need to plan the placement of transport and communication infrastructure to enhance connectivity and economic interaction among towns. Also, it implies how resources and goods can be distributed efficiently across a region to ensure economic stability and growth. So, okay, from the port city, so it's supposed to be the largest, node in the system. I'm looking for the largest node. Um, probably it's the strategic city. Or because this one is the market system, right? So we can call them like letter A, so dendritic market system. Um, so the smallest unit in the hierarchy, typically serving the immediate local population. And so what's larger than the village, or in Philippines we call them barangay, right? So yeah, this market, the local, okay, let me see, because this is a theory, and this is also a model. So, but in this particular context, it is expressed in a form of, generic expressions, like what you see here, the dependent hamlet, and then dependent village, isn't it? So, but they are all markets. So, if you can see, the smallest there is hamlet, okay, but in our context, it's called barangay because it's the smallest political unit in the Philippines. But here, it's interpreted as dependent hamlet. And then the next hierarchy there is dependent village, and then local marketplace, and then strategic city. Then there's the port city. Okay. But when we try to look or try to interpret the roles of each of these market, because they all belong to, you know, market system, but in a hierarchy. So we have the smallest, which is the dependent hamlet. Then there's the dependent village. So of course, they're supposed to serve the wider area. Okay, if it's in a hierarchy after the hamlet, and bringing together products from multiple villages and offering more services. And then the marketplace, the local marketplace there, or the intermeshed market towns, yeah, they are significant nodes that act as links between the central market town and then the standard market towns, or the next in the hierarchy, which is the local marketplace. And they facilitate the flow of goods and services across the system. So when we look at the largest there, para magkapantay lang si strategic at si port city, right? So I'm not sure how exact the sizes are, but I can see it's about same size. But of course, the largest node in the system, it acts as a major commercial center where goods from all over the region are traded and services are provided at a larger scale. So um, we can go to the next, which is letter B. So you can see the dendritic market system, okay? And then the letter B there is intermeshed market system. So I explained earlier about the dendritic market system because it forms like branches, but it is a hierarchy, but illustrated in a form of a branch-like or tree-like. This time around, it is the intermeshed. So you can see like a polygon, and the polygon comprising also some nodes there. So this model shows a network of interconnected nodes representing different types of market settlements. So same as the first one. However, it also forms a hierarchy. You can also see there the smallest or shaded black, and then partly shaded, parang ganun. All right. So it's also the same thing that the smallest, or the one farther from the center, typically serves the immediate local population, while the next one, which is should be larger, serve a wider area, bringing together products from multiple villages and offering more services. And the intermeshed market towns there, and why it's called intermeshed, because they act as links between the central market town, which at the center of the polygon, and the standard market towns, which surrounds the center, and facilitating the flow of goods and services across the system. So the largest node in the system, acting as a major commercial center where goods from all over the region are traded and services are provided at larger scale. So, of course, again, yeah, this model is particularly useful for understanding economic activity or connectivity, and then the spatial planning also, that place is planning the placement of transport and communication infrastructure to enhance connectivity and economic interaction among towns. I'm putting some detail there, but you cannot see anything about towns there, but it's all just dots. It's all just points, just a polygon and lines, isn't it? So that's the difficulty of explaining a model. Okay. Some but of course students or and emerging planners, as what I always deem everyone. And then you become environmental planners. Of course, you've been practicing for a while, right? So even probably longer than myself, but a board exam is a board exam. So we need to study all these things. So we need to gain insight into the principles of economic geography and regional planning, helping me us all understand the complexities of regional development and the strategic importance of market towns, how it moves around and how it connects, how it links with each other, so that it can sustain regional economies, because we are talking about region, not just the region that we know in Philippines, but the region like Asia is a region. So things like that. It can be related also to the wider market, the global market. So we can go to the next one. K equals 3. It's it illustrates the K equals 3 market system, which is a part of the theoretical framework that outlines the layout and function of market centers in a region based on their hierarchy and connectivity. Remember, this particular model comprising ABC, right? So they are um yeah, they are all called the components of a region. So it forms part of the theoretical framework that outlines the layout and function of market centers in a region. And there are two key elements or key components. We speak about hierarchy. The other one is connectivity. And this model, often associated with Christoller's central place theory, and we can articulate that in succeeding lectures anyway. And we will be talking probably 45 minutes or 30 minutes of just about Christoller, a central place theory, because this model is very universal, and he started it all about markets. And you can relate his theory with all fields like economics, urban planning, real estate, and everything that where connectivity and economics and all these things that are related to regional development. So Christoller's central place theory. So this is designed to show an optimal distribution of market centers such that they're equally accessible to the population they serve. So when we try to understand the K equals 3, because these images came from the book, a planning book. So the K equals 3 market system is characterized by that triangular lattice where each central market town is surrounded by 3 smaller towns or villages, forming a hierarchy. Still village, right? So we don't call it hamlet, but we call it barangay. So this geometric arrangement is ideal for minimizing travel distance for consumers across the region. So see, it's also about connectivity. Okay. So yeah, this geometric arrangement is ideal for minimizing travel distance, as I mentioned earlier. And so, the central market, which is at the center of the main triangle, there's a large dark shaded area, okay, representing a central market town. Like if we try to relate it with today, it's called the Central Business District. So this is the principal economic hub. I mean, uh, PRINCIPAL, the principal, the main economic hub where goods and services are aggregated and distributed to and from smaller market towns. The smaller nodes at the center of the main triangle, the smaller nodes. Okay. Um, so they represent lesser market towns or villages which serve the immediate local needs of the surrounding rural areas. Then the lines connecting these towns, so you can see the different lines there. Although they're split, they're far, right? There's no link there, but they are spread so apart. And so they represent the lines, okay, that you see connecting those nodes, but they are isolated. So this town symbolize roots of economic and social interaction, emphasizing efficient connectivity that reduces transportation costs and supports sustainable regional development. So once a node is being developed, then there are lines there that symbolizes um yeah how else they are able and how close and how far they can be connected to the larger market, which um is represented by that large dark shaded area. So yeah, this is a complex concept of spatial organization and economic interdependence in urban and regional planning. But this can aid in developing strategies for sustainable development and equitable service distribution in both theoretical and practical contexts. So we will come to know, but I think I mentioned already about the specific theory by Walter Christoller, and we can I can articulate this when we come to that particular theory, or just to make sure that there are three models, three behavior also of the market in this ABC types of system. So now we can go to the next slide. Environmental planning. Environmental planning is a profession, although we are already in uh R8 and 587, which is the one that's prevailing already as to the practice of profession. However, we can still just to madaanan lang natin because PD 1308 anyway, enacted on March 2, 1978, outlines the scope of activities related to the management and development of land, emphasizing preservation. So it's quite the same. You can see the same words, but on a larger paradigm. It has expanded in 10587, especially the scope of practice. But I will have a more dedicated lecture on PD 10587 that repealed this one. Okay. Anyway, 13. But it's good to understand the predecessor law or policy before it became R8 and 587. Anyway, if you look at the law of 10587, it did mention about 1308. Of course, because it's the one that amended 10587 amended this one. Also, PD 933, especially when we are doing the how it became this SUD. So before this SUD, there was PD 933 in 1976. So it led to the creation of the HSRC, the Human Settlements Commission, HSC, and then which later evolved HSRC, which later evolved into HLURB, and then it became the SUD. So, but um, it's also important to know that the objectives of PD 933, as you can see here, is number one, to liberate communities from urban blight and congestion. So this involves implementing policies to decongest urban areas and improve the quality of living conditions. So, and then another objective is promote ecological balance, ensuring development does not compromise the ecological and environmental health of the air of the different areas. So, okay. We can go to the next slide. We can skip that, Jen, because I want to concentrate on the scope of practice under 10587. Uh, but I would like them to have probably an advanced copy of the 10587. We can send that tonight, okay, so that they can study in advance and in preparation also for that particular. I will rearrange the lecture so that our 8 and 587 will come first before anything else. So the scope of practice, we will skip that scope of practice. We, but please yeah, remind me later about so that Jen can send you the new slide on 10587 for the scope of practice. Para hindi kayo malito. And then the fields of planning there. Okay. The fields of planning. This is not just the fields, but it's also in the 10587. I'm sure you will appreciate it more because yeah, we have a beautiful slide, I can say. Kasi, di ba, yellow. Yellow ulit yata yun. So, I'm looking forward to discussing about that particular slide. So, let's keep on that. But I need to discuss on the fields of planning anyway, that land use, it just said land use there. But of course, it encompasses a wide range of areas that are crucial for creating sustainable and functional communities. So land use meaning that we are supposed to be um very we need to be very familiar of managing the allocation of land for different uses in a manner that optimizes utility and sustainability. Then urban and rural community development. So in the US, one of the important specialization there is CONDEV. So it's focused on enhancing the livability and economic viability of both urban and rural areas. For urban design, the process of designing and shaping the physical features of cities, towns, and villages is what this one is all about, but not limited to. Of course, beyond that, urban design has been expanded as well. So over time, and development control there these are the regulatory measures aimed at controlling the nature and pace of physical developments. There's zoning and there are other, especially the environmental laws surrounding the field or the field of development control is subfield. And the resources there, we already have a lot about resources, especially we have Sidra, we have we have all these concepts on biodiversity and uh ecosystem analysis and many more. So I think we can already skip this, Jen, because I have a more, a more generous explanation on this or scope of this. So we can go to the next. Uh, Even this one, kulang. So 17 and then plus plus, di ba? Meron tayong mga plus plus dyan. But of course, um, yeah, number one is action plan for the protection of children. When I was with DILG, so I've been with DILG like 17 years, that long before I became, I moved to private practice. We also have there are many framework for children, and we also have the CICL, if you know that someone is here from the ILG, and it's called the children in conflict with law and many more. But of course, this plan outlines strategies and actions to protect children's rights and welfare, ensuring they're free from abuse, exploitation, and discrimination. There's the AFMA SAFDC plan. Actually, this is one of very critical parts of um land use planning. It's AFMA means it's the Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization Act. So that's, and then SAFDZ also is Strategic Agriculture and Fisheries Development Zone Plan, the SAFDZ, and these are focused on designated zones to boost agriculture and fisheries productivity through modernized approaches and sustainable practice. Then there's the culture and arts plan, anti-poverty reduction plan, and many more here. But each of these plans are being articulated in this review class, so you don't need to worry. Um, Also, this food security plan, I remember this was during the time of ERAP. He focused on this, and 'di ba? If you remember, there's ERAP para sa mahirap, all this framework on agriculture. And so his advisors are back during during the time of, I think, Duterte, and then even during the time of PBBM. If you look at the framework of Department of Agriculture, and so except for some, most are technology driven already. But during the time of ARAP, it's all about agriculture that have been um that being highlighted in his administration. So food security plan ensures a stable and sustainable supply of safe and nutritious food, addressing issues from production to distribution. But all these are supposed to be linked or responsive to the SDG. So forest management plan, GAD plan. Okay, so a lot also should be discussed about GAD or you know mm, then there's peace and order. Kulang na kulang talaga to, but we will skip again this because it's just an enumeration, but we will have discussions on each of these plans. Also this one. So I'd like to just emphasize on number, no, if you can go back to the last, to that slide, which is the ads PP. I hope you are familiar with ads DPP, which is the ancestral domains, the sustainable development and protection plan. This is a plan required for areas with indigenous populations, focusing on protecting their rights and promoting sustainable development without compromising their cultural integrity. So, uh, yeah, it's an important sub-plan as well. Then, of course, traffic management plan, which is being developed, especially for cities, metropolitan cities, HUCs, component cities, and for, yeah, all LGUs should be developing strategies to improve traffic flow, right? In anticipation, especially for rural areas that you need to anticipate for future, when don't prepare traffic management plan when it becomes urban. I mean, you need to, that's why it's called plan, because we need to project populations, project also yeah, infrastructure, the demands, especially for urban planning, that we need to prepare or develop strategies to reduce congestion based on the current and projected population, and enhance road safety in urban and rural areas through infrastructure improvements, traffic regulations, and public transport enhancements. So these plans are vital for balanced development. We can go to the next one. So this is where we came from. The professional planning from the American Planning Association. Most of our especially our code of ethics um and largely our planning um originated, or our histories are the global or our international planning framework is has originated from the US especially. So most of our concepts, most of our theories are they came from American thinkers, models. So and strongly, they have strongly influenced our urban planning practice, our laws from throughout the years. So over time, we had engaged in activities that affect decisions on policies. So most of our public policies are informed by US planning policies. So, okay. Then you can see there are four criteria. So probably we can tackle this one. Yeah, number one, influencing public decision making make decision making in the public interest. It means that um yeah, as I mentioned earlier, those that informs public decision making um should be okay. Let me see. It says you're recommending specific actions or choices to elected appointed officials, private sector representatives, or others regarding public decisions concerning social, economic, or physical change in the public interest. So it's important that the underpinning or the foundation should be uh always in public interest or in the interests of the public. So that's number one general principle or one of those criteria by the American Planning or American Institute of Planners and the American Planning Association. The next one is employing an appropriately comprehensive point of view. Okay. So this involves assessing the broad impacts and governmental implications. It's about understanding the interconnections and potential outcomes of planning choices on various various scales. So looking at the consequences there, meaning that planners must evaluate the effects of their proposals, not just in the immediate context, but also in terms of long-term sustainability and wider impacts on the community and the environment. So, um, conforming says conforming a proposed decision to the larger context in which it will occur. So this criterion requires planners to align their specific planning activities and decisions with broader societal, economic, and environmental goals, ensuring that these are not isolated but part of a holistic approach to development. And then three, number, this is number three. So treating multiple policies, actions, or systems simultaneously when interlinkages are too great to treat separately. So this speaks to the complexity of urban planning where different factors such as land use, transportation, housing, and resource management are interdependent. So effective planning practices should integrate these elements to address comprehensive challenges coherently. So we can go to the next criteria. Next one. Applying a planning process appropriate to the situation. So it would be good for us to know about how the APA and the AICP contributed to our own planning system. So this criterion focuses on the practical application of planning processes tailored to the specific circumstances of a project involving number one, the number and order of its steps. So if you just look at that, yeah, could be about yeah, could be like complex, but this includes how the planning process is structured. Okay. Key phases such as identifying the problem or opportunity and then setting the goals, developing strategies, Choosing a specific plan of action and implementing and evaluating the plan must be sequentially and logically organized, just what we have with the 12 steps process of H as advised or as recommended by HLURB, now DSUD. So that's what it means, that the number and order of its steps. And then its orientation to the future. Planners should approach each project with a forward-looking perspective because it's to the future, right? Considering long-term impacts and sustainability, this includes anticipating future needs and changes in the environment and society and technology, among others. So, and that's the reason why we need to project um using existing data or the most recent data, and then the trends and some of those information to inform our land use planning effort. So then number 3 is its quality of research and analysis. So high standards for research and analytical methods are crucial, providing a solid foundation for planning decisions. This involves gathering accurate and comprehensive data and applying appropriate analytical techniques to inform strategy and policy development, among others. And we also have there, the next is format of policy, program, or plan proposal. So the final presentation of the planning process should be professionally structured, clear, and actionable. So it should effectively communicate the objectives, strategies, expected outcomes, and any other relevant information to stakeholders. So these criteria collectively ensure that planning professionals should engage in meaningful, effective, and adaptable practices that align with both immediate and long-term public interest. And then I think that the fourth one among the fourth criteria is involving a professional level of responsibility and resourcefulness. So this criterion centers on the planner's ability to take initiative and demonstrate significant involvement and personal accountability in the planning process. So it entails initiative, as what you can see in the slide. So we need to have initiative, and it's our ability to start projects, make decisions, and move processes forward without needing constant direction. So it means planners should be proactive, seeking out opportunities to improve or address planning challenges. Judgment, right? So you can also see judgment there. Planners are expected to make informed decisions based on a thorough understanding of the urban environment, societal needs, and the potential impacts of their plans. This involves weighing various factors and potential outcomes to arrive at decisions that best serve the community. Then substantial involvement there, or yeah, substantial involvement that means that planners must be deeply engaged in the projects they work on, from conception through to execution. This means not only playing a role in initial planning, but also actively managing and adapting plans as they are implemented. So, personal accountability. Okay, please follow what's on the slide there. Planners must take responsibility for their decisions and the outcomes of the projects they're involved in. This includes being answerable for both the successes and failures of their initiatives. And the last one there is defining and preparing significant substantive elements of planning in the activities. This involves the detailed work of planning, such as defining the scope, setting the objectives, designing the methodology, and preparing the actionable elements of planning documents, just among those, among others. So we need to demonstrate these qualities um, that should ensure that a planner can effectively influence and guide urban development in a manner that aligns with best practices and ethical standards. So we go to the next slide. Then next slide. Not moving. Okay. So planning profession in the Philippines. Um, so you can see a graphic there that represents the structure of the planning profession in Philippines, showcasing how different sectors and elements interact to form a cohesive system. So academe there, educate means education, provides the foundational knowledge and training in environmental planning. But of course, there are a lot of providers these days, right? So academe could influence both the public and private sectors through the dissemination of research and the training of professionals. But then again, besides the academic sector, we already have providers a lot to for planners to leverage on keep um yeah improving ourselves. So government is a vast institution. It's responsible for according to this slide, it's responsible for program and project implementation, and it of course it interacts, it's supposed to interact with the education sector and all other sectors. Then sewer programs align with the latest with academic findings and practices. So that's with the academe, and should also work closely with private sector and private practice to apply planning principles in real world scenarios. So you can also see there IEP, which is our APO. Our APO means Accredited Professional Organization, the Philippine Institute of Environmental Planners, and PRC, Professional Regulation Commission, and the board. So uh, the board in charge for the PRC board, or what we call the Professional Regulation Board, in charge of our field is the PRB EP, means that the PRB of Environmental Planning. So sila yung magbibigay ng exam ninyo, and of course they regulate the profession, ensuring standards are met in both education and practice. So they oversee the licensure and accreditation of professionals to maintain ethical and professional standards. So what's the role of private sector there? Um, yeah, applies environmental planning in commercial projects and investments. So they also collaborate with all other sectors, right? So they also engage with educational institutions for research and development. So ensuring industry practices are innovative and up to date. It should also cooperate with government on project implementation, planning and implementation, especially in public-private partnerships. Okay, so, and of course, everyone is looking into improving the field of environmental planning that connects all these sectors in uh, the practice of plannings. Go to the next one. Yeah, I already said this one, but okay. So we can see some of this in RA 10.587, the role of each sector. Okay. But I already said this one. But we can go to the roles, Jen. To the roles of, okay, of a planner, but not limited to. Nadagdagan na rin yung role natin, and it has expanded over time until, and you can see them in R8 and 587. But for purposes of discussing this, yeah, the content of this slides, which were all, most of which have been asked in the board exam. So, and that's why it's there. Yeah, it has been, our role is very diverse, um, and it's supposed to be impactful. We have it should be impactful roles that we are looking into, because we are planners. As regulator, we ensure that um community developments adhere to government rules and standards, playing a critical role in regulatory compliance. And as a policy advisor, we provide expertise to policymakers. So we can also specialize in policy planning. Um, so we offer guidance on planning principles that should shape legislative and regulatory frameworks. As a designer in this role, planners act as consultants who conceptualize, develop, and refine plans for urban and rural areas, ensuring that these plans are both innovative and practical, and actionable as well. Planner as visionary, we are tasked with imagining and projecting the future of urban spaces, anticipating growth and changes, and planning for long-term sustainability. As mediators, so why do we need to be a mediator? Because we often mediate between different community groups, stakeholders, and government entities to reconcile conflicting interests and achieve a consensus on planning initiatives. So either whether we are a government planner or private sector, or if we are a private consultant, then we should play a key role, whereby we need to become a mediator at times. So facilitator, this is very common because we enable various planning activities and discussions, ensuring that all stakeholders are engaged and that processes run smoothly. So not only, I guess most if not all have been playing all these different roles. We wear different hats, right? So as advocate, we champion the needs and concerns of the public. So especially in forums where urban development and community needs are discussed. So we need to play a key role here, and we are championing this one as advocates. So as educator, we are supposed to contribute to the body of knowledge, to academic and professional training programs, educating new generations of planners like yourselves. I'm sure even before you take the board exams, you already have played all this one, and or even more than what you see on the list. So I would be very glad to see in the future that um you have strengthened these roles that you've been playing before you even took the board exam. So we um we proceed to the ethical principles. I will also be articulating on the code of ethics, which com which form part of the board exam. I mean, the board exam is heavy on the practice of profession. It's also heavy on the code of ethics. It's also heavy on yeah, on some, regional planning as well. So we we will have some discussions on that on a deeper scale or deeper analysis level. So but this one, ethical principles for planners by the American Planning Association. But of course, it, not just the American Planning Association, but we base our code of ethics from the APA and the AICP. So the American Planning Association, I should say. So we try to tackle that as a planner, we are tasked with serving the welfare of the public at large, ensuring that their decisions benefit community well-being and sustainability. Uh, yeah, also planners we are supposed to encourage and facilitate the involvement of citizens in the planning process, ensuring that community has a voice and decisions that affect their lives. And so it could be at a project level, could be in a program level, activity level, policy level. So we're supposed to be everywhere to support citizen participation. Then planners must consider the broad impacts of their decisions, including long-term effects on the community and environment to ensure sustainability and foresight and planning. Then expanding choice and opportunity for all. This principle involves ensuring that planning decisions do not favor one group over another, and that we provide equal opportunities for all community members, particularly underserved or marginalized groups. I think it's not the first time I've mentioned about this one. So it's all encompassed in the ethical principles for planners. Then planners should work towards harmonizing actions and policies across different sectors and regions, improving the overall effectiveness and coherence of planning initiatives. So these principles guide planners to act ethically and responsibly, balancing various interests and ensuring equitable, sustainable, and participative urban development. We can continue ethical principles in the next page. So avoid conflict of interest means that we do not engage in any activities that could compromise uh the the publics or the that could compromise impartiality their impartiality or appear to conflict with the execution of the planner's duties. So yeah, this is sometimes difficult to distinguish that we need to have more experience, or we need to because we learn about this and we practice this over time, and how we could avoid conflict of interest in any of our activities. So second is render thorough and diligent planning service. This principle requires planners to be meticulous and committed in their work, ensuring all aspects of planning are considered and addressed with professional competence. Yeah, we cannot be, yeah, how they call that? I forgot the term, but we should be on top of our game to make sure that in the context of our practice, we're supposed to lead it. And then to make so people should see us, or they should be confident about our practice, our competence in this field. So do not seek or offer favors. Planners must maintain ethical integrity by neither seeking nor offering undue favors from or to stakeholders, thereby upholding fairness and objectivity in our professional conduct. And also do not disclose or improperly use confidential information. Well, protecting the confidentiality of sensitive information is crucial, like, because we have Data Privacy Act. Even before the Data Privacy Act already, planners already should you should be adhering to this even before. So planners must not misuse the information they are privy to during the course of their professional duties. And then we can continue to the next slide. Okay. This principle ensure access to public reports on an equal basis. So this principle emphasizes the importance of transparency and fairness in providing all interested parties equal access to public documents and reports related to planning. Then ensure full disclosure at public hearings. So planners must be committed to transparency, ensuring that all relevant information is openly disclosed during public hearings. This helps the public make informed decisions and contributes to fair and democratic planning processes. Maintain public confidence. Planners are expected to conduct themselves in a manner that maintains and enhances the public's trust in the planning profession. This includes adherence to ethical standards and behaviors that uphold the planner's dignity and integrity. Fourth bullet is respect professional codes of ethics and conduct. This principle requires planners to adhere strictly to establish professional codes of ethics and conduct, ensuring that their behavior or our behavior aligns with the highest standards of the profession. This includes respecting the boundaries of our professional capabilities and avoiding actions that could bring disrepute to the profession. So in the within PIEP, there are three major sections of the Code of Ethics. But anyway, I will be discussing later more specifics, our more specific Code of Ethics. But just to make sure we're understanding these three sections. Next slide. Yeah. So I was talking about this earlier. So I'll just count how many slides do we have. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So we're almost done with lecture 1. So we will end this tonight. Okay. Aspirational standards. So because in the Code of Ethics, there would be questions later that um would let you decide or let you categorize if it's aspirational or enforceable. So we need to make some categorizations or yeah here. So aspirational standards are principles to which we aspire. So that's easy. And what are these things that we know under this aspirational standards? Integrity, okay? Integrity. This principle um focuses on maintaining the dignity and respect of the planning profession, because we are talking about integrity of the profession. But this is reflected through our ethical practices. So that's integrity of the profession. Then client service, ensuring that planners serve their clients with dedications and adhere to professional standards. Then public service and public welfare emphasizes the role of planners in serving the public interest and contributing to public welfare through their professional activities. Next is transparency and accountability. Talks about or deals with advocating for open communication and accountability in all planning practices to build trust with the public and stakeholders. Then we move to enforceable standards. These are now the specific rules of conduct. Okay, so yeah, now you are able to make some distinctions between the two. So um representation of qualification, that we cannot misrepresent ourselves. So it requires planners to accurately represent their qualifications and not mislead about your professional capabilities. Fair competition is next, which encourages fair competition among planners without unethical interference or practices. Release of information, we already discussed that earlier, that it outlines rules about how and what information may be shared publicly, maintaining confidentiality where required. Professional development is or continuing through continuing education. Um, 32 hours every year, that's no longer the updated one. We just need 15 units, or yeah, 15 units. So it should be expressed in units. But of course, normally 1 unit. So I know most of you here are professionals already and member, so you already hold a professional identification card. So you're a member of any of those um yeah professions under PRC. So um we need 15, right? So 15 units. Um so it mandates planners to pursue 15 units. That's an updated one of continuing education every year to keep their knowledge and skills up to date. Uh, we we will all encounter this in R8 and 587. So the rules of procedure there is there would be this would include specific guidelines and processes that govern how the standards are enforced and how ethical dilemmas and violations are handled within the profession. So anyway, we can proceed to the next one. Mm, general ethical awareness, the general ethical competency, service to others, then integrity and objectivity. So, professional competence, solidarity, and teamwork. Anyway, we already, of course, these are self-explanatory, but for that, solidarity and teamwork there. That's promoting teamwork and solidarity among members of the profession. Like we all belong to one accredited professional organization, which is the PIEP. And so putting the broader interests of the profession and society above personal ambitions and preferences. That would be explained in and our bylaws and in our code of ethics as well. So we go to the next social and civic. Okay, we can do the social. Next one, next slide. Planners under social and civic responsibility, planners are encouraged. Okay, you can see due consideration the broader interests of the publics contribute to attainment of the country's national something motherhood statement, but we are all encouraged to give due consideration to the broader interests of the public, right? So that's what it says, and contribute towards the achievement of the country's national objectives, because this standard emphasizes the planner's role in promoting the common good and social welfare. So, global competitiveness there is, it urges planners to embrace challenges presented by a dynamic and interconnected world, right? Especially during the pandemic, and it became like a borderless world or society. And because we aim for a practice that meets global standards, and that's why we're doing ISO and all these things that contributes to the field of the if the contributes to the planning profession. So we need to incorporate international best practices as well. And it highlights the importance of staying relevant and effective within the global context. So equality of all professions. So what do we mean by that? That we need to recognize the significance of all professions, right? So we are the most unique professional because we are a combination of all the professions uh that are, you know, like allied professionals. We are civil engineer planner, architect planner, economist planner, lawyer planner, right? We are done. It can even extend to, you know, like 10 professions. I know some people who have that much. So we advocate for a mutual respect among different professional disciplines. And this standard stresses that while each profession is distinct, we are all equally important to society, and professionals should treat each other with respect and fairness. We don't need to bash, especially on social media, right? So we normally hear the relevance between, like, controversy between an architect and an engineer, and they keep fighting for nothing. And because we need to recognize we have our own role, and we need to recognize that we need each other, right? So you cannot stand alone, or because, for example, subdivision plan development. So it's not just the work of environmental planner. We need all sorts of professional in the development of not only subdivision plan and many more CLUPs, or because it's multi-sectoral, so there's a need for an interdisciplinary team and many more, and all types of plans. We need to help each other. So yeah, there's that we demonstrate that equality of all professions. But of course, there's someone who should be leading. And for example, the most universal type of study is the feasibility study. So there are many levels of feasibility study, at the conceptual level, at the detailed level. So we need more and more professionals to be on board, right? So And you can see also that feasibility study is included or in the scope of practice of environmental planners in RA 10587, even here in PD 1308. However, yeah, we know for a fact that it's a very universal study. So, and again, equality of all professions. We need means that not the equality per se, but it's about respecting each other, um, and treating each other with respect and fairness. We got to. So I think we are okay because the Code of Ethical Planners in the next slide is already it has been amended already, so we have a new one. So we will discuss that for the next session. Um, so anyway, so congratulations, we're done with lecture one, but of course with supplementation from RA 10587, Code of Ethics. And yeah, yun muna ang dalawa for next time, okay? For our next session. So yeah, please open your camera